Happy birthday, Mom. Now, about the auction. My son Leo didn't even let the off-key chorus of Happy Birthday fade from the air. The words cut through the warmth of the room, sharp and cold as a shard of glass. 70 candles, a tiny forest of fire, flickered on the cake my grandniece Sarah had so carefully decorated with sugared bluebonnets. I had just drawn a breath to blow them out, a wish for a quiet year forming in my heart. But the wish died on my lips, turning to smoke. Leo slid his phone across the polished oak of the dining table David had built with his own 2 hands. The screen glowed with the sterile, aggressive layout of a real estate auction website. A picture of a sprawling, characterless mansion was centered on the page. "The market's peaking," he said, his voice flat, devoid of any celebratory tone. It was the voice he used for quarterly reports and stock market analyses. "We can't afford to miss this window. We list the Homestead Monday." The flicker of the 70 flames danced in his eyes, but there was no warmth in them, only a cold, expectant sheen. He wasn't looking at me, his mother on her 70th birthday. He was looking at a depreciating asset. The silence that fell over the small gathering of friends and neighbors was thick and suffocating. I could feel their discomfort, their gazes shifting from Leo's callous face to my own, searching for a reaction I was too numb to provide. My world narrowed to the tiny, wavering flames, each one a year of laughter, a year of planting the garden with David, a year of raising Leo in this very house, a year of grief after David was gone. 70 years, summarized in a single, brutal transaction. The phone lay on the table between us, an obscene intrusion, a digital tombstone for a life still being lived. My daughter-in-law, Chloe, ever the diplomat, chose that moment to intervene. She placed a hand on my arm, her nails perfectly manicured, her touch feeling less like comfort and more like a claim. Her voice, a carefully modulated purr, dripped with a sympathy so manufactured it was insulting. "It's for the best, Anna, really," she cooed, squeezing my arm gently. "You can't possibly manage this big place all by yourself. The upkeep, the taxes, it's a tremendous burden." She leaned in closer, her expensive perfume cloying and sweet, a stark contrast to the scent of beeswax from the candles and the rich chocolate of the cake. "Think of the freedom. No more worrying about a leaky roof or the lawn. We've already done the research. We've found you a lovely, lovely room at the Serene Meadows Senior Living Community. It's top-rated, Serene Meadows. The name sounded like a cruel joke, a pasture for the old and forgotten. Chloe painted a picture of it for our captive audience, her voice bright and persuasive. She spoke of organized activities, community dining, and on-site medical supervision. She made it sound like a resort, but I heard the truth between the lines. It was a holding pen, a place where I would be neatly filed away, my life contained within 4 beige walls, waiting for the end while they carved up my real home and cashed it in. I looked from her smiling, predatory face to Leo's, who nodded in agreement, his expression unchanged. He was impatient, tapping a finger on the edge of his phone. They were a team. This wasn't a spontaneous, poorly timed suggestion. This was a pre-planned, coordinated ambush. They had rehearsed this. They had brochures. Chloe even started to reach into her purse, her eyes gleaming. My gaze fell back to the cake, the beautiful, intricate bluebonnet Sarah had piped with such care. She was only 19, a budding artist herself, and she knew how much the state flower of Texas, the flower David and I had cultivated in the front meadow, meant to me. It was a gift of love, of memory, of connection. And now, the sweetness of the gesture, the very chocolate I could almost taste, turned to ash in my mouth. The room felt impossibly small, the air thin. The faces of my friends were a blur of pity and helplessness. They were guests at my execution. My son was the executioner, and his wife, the one assuring me it was all for my own good. They weren't celebrating my life. They weren't honoring my 70 years. They were impatiently waiting for it to be over, to be tidied up and liquidated. I finally looked at Leo, really looked at him. My boy, the child I taught to walk on these very floors, whose height I'd marked on the doorframe in the kitchen. I saw nothing of that boy in the man before me. I saw a stranger, a financial analyst who saw his mother's home, his own childhood home, as nothing more than numbers on a screen. He saw the land not as a sanctuary David had built, but as untapped square footage. He saw me not as his mother, but as the primary obstacle to his financial gain. The candles continued to burn. Wax began to drip down onto the bluebonnets, little white tears on a field of blue. No one moved. No one spoke. The happy birthday song was a distant, mocking echo. The breath I had been holding to make a wish was still trapped in my lungs, a painful pressure in my chest. I knew then that my wish had changed. It was no longer for a quiet year. It was for strength, for a fight. Chloe, sensing my silence was not the acquiescence she had hoped for, pressed on. "Anna, we're just thinking of you," she insisted, her voice taking on a slightly harder edge. "Leo has power of attorney, you know. He's just trying to do what's best for your portfolio. This property it's irresponsible to just sit on it. The market could turn at any moment. Portfolio. They called my life a portfolio. They called David's legacy an asset to be leveraged. The love, the sweat, the shared dreams that had soaked into the very walls of this house were being dismissed as poor financial planning. The friends at the table began to stir, muttering quiet excuses. It was too much. The cruelty was too naked. Mrs. Gable from next door, a friend of 40 years, wouldn't meet my eye as she gathered her purse. "It's getting late, Anna. Happy birthday, dear." Her words were a whisper. One by one, they left, leaving a trail of half-eaten cake and strained apologies in their wake. Soon, it was just the three of us, in the cavernous silence of the dining room. The 70 candles had burned lower now, their flames sputtering. Leo finally pocketed his phone, the deal-making portion of the evening apparently concluded in his mind. He looked at me as if I were a stubborn child. "Mom, don't be emotional about this," he said, his tone a poor attempt at reason. "This is a practical matter. The house is too much for you. The money from the sale will ensure you are comfortable for the rest of your time. It's the logical next step. The rest of my time." He said it so clinically, as if my remaining years were a line item on a budget, a final expense to be managed. I looked around the room, at the hand-hewn beams in the ceiling, at the stone fireplace David had built from river rocks we'd gathered ourselves, at the portrait I had painted of him that hung above the mantel, his eyes kind and smiling. This house wasn't a collection of assets. It was the C-spine of my life. It was the physical manifestation of my marriage, and they wanted to bulldoze it for profit. I finally let out the breath I had been holding. It came out not as a sigh, but as a slow, cold exhalation. I didn't blow out the candles. I let them burn themselves out, one by one, until the room was cast in the dim, mournful light of the evening. I said nothing. The silence was my only weapon, my only shield against their calculated cruelty. They wanted an answer. They wanted my signature. They wanted my surrender. I looked at the dark, empty space where my friends had been, and then at the two predators sitting at my table, and I gave them nothing. The ash in my mouth tasted like resolve. The war had just begun. The silence that followed their departure was heavier than any sound I had ever known. It pressed down on me, a physical weight in the air, thick with the ghosts of their cruel words. The remnants of my 70th birthday party lay scattered across the dining room table, a single forgotten slice of cake with its frosting weeping under the warm light, a few deflated balloons clinging sadly to the floor, and the garish, oversized happy birthday banner Chloe had insisted on hanging. It seemed to mock me now, a testament to a celebration that was never meant to celebrate my life, but to orchestrate its end. I am Anna, 70 years old, a widow. Before the world decided I was only these things, old, alone, a problem to be managed. I was something else entirely. Before Leo was a whisper in my future, before this house held the echo of loss, I was a botanical artist. My hands, now spotted with age and stiffened by a touch of arthritis, once moved with a life of their own. They knew the delicate weight of a graphite pencil, the thirsty pull of watercolor on thick cotton paper. I spent my days in the company of silent, vibrant things, capturing the intricate, almost secret life of petals and leaves. I could render the blush on a new rose so delicately you'd think you could smell its fragrance, or the complex, geometric veins of a fern so precisely you could feel its waxy texture. My art wasn't about creating beauty, but about bearing witness to it. It was a form of prayer, a way of saying, I see you. You matter. My late husband, David, understood this in a way no one else ever has. He was a man who saw the soul in things, an engineer by trade, but a poet by nature. He didn't just build this house on the outskirts of Austin, Texas, he coaxed it from the earth. I remember the day he brought me here. It was nothing but a field of bluebonnets and Indian paintbrush, baking under the vast, unforgiving Texas sun. He stood in the middle of it, his hands on his hips, a familiar dreamer's glint in his eyes. He said, Anna, this is it. This is where our life will grow. He didn't see a plot of land, he saw a future. He saw the place where our children would learn to walk, where we would grow old watching the sunsets paint the sky. And he built it. He laid every single stone for the foundation, his hands raw and calloused, but his spirit soaring. He chose the wood for the beams himself, running his hand along the grain, speaking of its strength and character, as if it were a living thing. The scent of fresh-cut pine and cedar filled our lives for 2 years. Our weekends were a symphony of saws and hammers, our evenings spent poring over blueprints he'd drawn himself on our tiny apartment's kitchen table. This house wasn't just property assembled from a catalog. It was a testament to our love, a living, breathing thing imbued with his sweat, his laughter, and his unwavering belief in us. Every corner holds a memory so vivid it feels like I could reach out and touch it. The wide, cool stone of the fireplace hearth. David laid those stones himself, searching for river rocks with the perfect flat faces. We spent our first Christmas Eve in the unfinished living room, sitting on dusty blankets in front of a crackling fire, a tiny, lopsided fir tree in the corner. He'd wrapped his arm around me, the smell of wood smoke in his hair, and whispered, Welcome home, my love. The kitchen counters are made of solid maple, now scarred with the faint lines of 1,000 cuts from my chopping knife, and a small, dark ring where I once set down a hot pot in a moment of haste. I remember kneading bread dough on that very spot, my hands dusted with flour, while David sat at the table, reading the paper, and occasionally stealing a pinch of raw dough, his laughter booming when I swatted his hand away. He built the window seat in the study for me, knowing my love for curling up with a book on a rainy afternoon. He even measured the height to be perfect for me to rest my head against the cool glass and watch the Texas thunderstorms roll in across the plains. The porch swing, where we sat on countless warm evenings, sipping iced tea and listening to the cicadas buzz their nightly chorus, still creaks with the same familiar rhythm. He was the gardener, too. He didn't just plant trees. He curated a sanctuary. He planted the towering live oaks that now shade the house, knowing they would outlive us both. They're for the future, Anna, he'd say, patting the soil around a sapling. For the birds, for the squirrels, for whoever comes after us. He taught me the names of all the native grasses, the way the soil needed to be nurtured, not just used. Our garden wasn't a manicured, sterile display. It was a collaboration with nature, a vibrant, chaotic, beautiful ecosystem. He loved my art, and he built this place to be my endless inspiration. My studio, with its north-facing windows bathing the room in soft, constant light, was his masterpiece. It was his gift to me, a space where my soul could be free. He understood that my art was an extension of my being, and he gave it a home. We lived a life here that felt sacred. We raised Leo in these rooms. His first steps were taken on the worn oak floors of the hallway. His height chart is still faintly penciled on the pantry doorframe, a ladder of small lines marking his journey from a toddler to a young man who towered over me. I sacrificed my art career, but I never saw it as a sacrifice. I chose to pour that same devotion into my son, into our family. I packed it away piece by piece, the canvases and the paints and the pencils, not with regret, but with the quiet understanding that my life was now a different kind of art form. My masterpiece was my home, my family, the love that bloomed within these walls. I lived for David. I lived for Leo. It was a simple, uncomplicated devotion. I didn't need a career or accolades. The measure of my wealth was the sound of their laughter echoing through the halls, the comfort of our shared life. I never thought to question it. I never thought to protect myself. From what? From whom? The world I had built with David was safe. It was loving. It was forever. And then, it wasn't. When David passed, the light and color of my world seemed to drain away, leaving everything in shades of muted gray. The house, once a vibrant testament to his love, suddenly felt vast and hollow. The silence was no longer peaceful. It was a screaming void where his voice used to be. I was adrift in a sea of grief, a fog so thick I couldn't see the shore. The paperwork, the bills, the endless administrative details of death were a cruel, bureaucratic assault on my sorrow. I couldn't make sense of it. The numbers on the pages were meaningless. David had always handled the finances. He had a portfolio, investments, accounts I barely understood. He'd tried to explain it to me over the years, but I'd always waved him off with a smile. That's your domain, my love. My domain is the garden. It was a comfortable division of labor, born of trust and love. Now, his domain was a terrifying, incomprehensible labyrinth. It was into this chaos that Leo stepped, my son, the financial analyst with his sharp suits and slick downtown firm. He arrived one afternoon, his face a mask of practiced concern. He found me at the kitchen table, surrounded by a mountain of envelopes and official-looking documents, my head in my hands. "Mom," he said, his voice soft, reasonable. "You can't do this to yourself. You're grieving. You need to rest, to heal." He began to sort the papers with an unnerving efficiency, his fingers moving quickly, confidently. "Let me take care of this," he offered. "It's what I do for a living. I can manage all of Dad's accounts, consolidate everything, make it simple for you. You won't have to worry about a single thing." I looked into his eyes, searching for the boy whose height I had marked on the pantry door. I saw a man, serious and capable. I saw what I desperately wanted to see, a protector. My son, stepping into his father's shoes to take care of his grieving mother. It felt like a lifeline. The relief that washed over me was immense, so powerful it brought fresh tears to my eyes. "Oh, Leo," I whispered, my voice choked. "Would you? I don't understand any of it." "Of course, Mom," he said, pulling a chair close. "I'll set everything up. I'll get power of attorney just for your financial affairs. It's a formality. It will allow me to deal with the banks and the investment firms on your behalf. It just makes it easier for you." Power of attorney. The words meant little to me then. They sounded official, responsible, a tool to help. I was drowning, and he was offering me a raft. I trusted him. He was my son, David's son, the flesh and blood of the man who had built this sanctuary for me. Why would I not trust him? And so, in a haze of grief and exhaustion, I signed the papers he put in front of me. I signed them on the very same kitchen table where I had once kneaded bread, where David had read the paper, where we had lived our lives. I signed away my autonomy without a second thought, believing I was accepting help, accepting protection. In the beginning, it seemed to be just that. The threatening pile of paperwork vanished from the table. Leo set up a simple bank account for me, with a debit card for groceries and daily expenses. He would transfer a set amount into it each month, an allowance, he called it. The word chafed a little, but I told myself it was just semantics. He took over the property taxes, the utility bills, the insurance payments. "All automated, Mom," he'd say proudly during his brief, dutiful weekly phone calls. "You don't have to lift a finger." And I was grateful. The fog of grief was slow to lift, and the absence of those worries allowed me the space to mourn my husband properly. I could walk in the garden David had planted, sit on our porch swing, and just be. I thought he was honoring his father's memory by taking care of me. I thought he was being a good son. But slowly, subtly, the nature of the arrangement began to shift. The raft he had offered me started to feel more like a cage. It began with small things. I saw a beautiful, rare orchid at the garden center, a variety David and I had always wanted to find. It was expensive, but I knew David had left me more than comfortable. I went to pay with my card, and it was declined. The embarrassment was hot and sharp. I called Leo, flustered. "Oh, Mom," he'd said. a hint of patronizing patience in his voice. Your monthly budget doesn't cover luxury items like that. We have to be smart about this. We're thinking about the long term. His "we" felt exclusive, like a club I wasn't a part of. The long term? David and I had built the long term. I was living in it. Another time, an old friend from my art school days was exhibiting her work in Santa Fe. I wanted to go, to see her, to feel that part of myself stir again. I needed to book a flight and a hotel. When I asked Leo to transfer the funds, he hesitated. "A trip, Mom. Is that really wise right now? It's an unnecessary expense. And is it safe for you to be traveling alone?" The question wasn't about my safety. It was about his control. He made me feel frail, incompetent. I didn't go. The cage was getting smaller. The internet was another battleground. David had set up an online portfolio for me to track our investments, a little window into the world he managed. I tried to log in one day, just out of curiosity, and the password had been changed. I called Leo. "Oh yeah, I updated all the security protocols," he said breezily. "Much safer now. Don't worry about it, Mom. It's all performing well. I'm handling it. Don't worry about it." I was being told not to worry about my own life, my own money, my own future. I was being patted on the head and told to go tend my garden while the grown-ups handled the important business. I started to feel like a ghost in my own life. The house was mine, but the finances that kept it running were a complete mystery, locked away behind passwords and professional jargon. I was a tenant, living on a stipend provided by my guardian. The word began to taste like poison in my mouth. He wasn't protecting me. He was managing me. He was containing me. The trust I had so freely given him had been twisted into a weapon of control. He had used my grief, my vulnerability, and my love for him as leverage to seize power. And now, sitting here in the wreckage of my birthday party, the final, brutal truth of it all crashed down on me. His demand to sell the house, Chloe's saccharine suggestion of a nursing home, it wasn't a new idea born of desperation. It was the end game. It had always been the end game. This slow, methodical stripping away of my independence, this financial imprisonment, it was all groundwork. It was a strategy designed to make me feel so helpless, so dependent, so utterly powerless that when they finally came to take everything, I would have no strength left to fight. They had been preparing for this for years. Leo hadn't just taken over my finances to make my life easier. He had taken them over to make his life easier. He had isolated me, financially and emotionally, turning David's legacy of love and security into a prison. The promise I thought he was upholding, the promise of a son to care for his mother, was a lie. He was honoring a different kind of promise, one he had made to himself, the promise of an inheritance. He wasn't waiting for me to die. He was simply trying to expedite the process, to liquidate my life for his convenience. The house, this sacred space, this living monument to my husband's love, was nothing more than an asset on a balance sheet to him, a number to be unlocked. And I, Anna, its keeper, its soul, was just the final obstacle to be removed. The ghost of a promise haunted this house, but it wasn't David's promise to me. It was Leo's promise to himself, a promise of greed that was about to shatter everything I held dear. It began subtly, not with a shout, but with the crunch of unfamiliar tires on the gravel driveway a few days after my birthday. I was in the back garden, my hands deep in the soil where David and I had planted the heirloom roses, the scent of earth and memory clinging to my fingers. The sound was wrong. It wasn't the mail carrier or a neighbor. It was the sound of business, of purpose, of intrusion. I rose, wiping my hands on my apron, and saw them. 2 luxury sedans, gleaming black under the Texas sun, parked near the porch as if they owned it. Leo emerged from the first car, not with the gait of a son visiting his mother, but with the brisk, commanding stride of a general leading an invasion. He didn't look at me. His eyes were fixed on the 4 men who followed him, all of them clones in sharp, dark suits and shoes so pointed they seemed capable of piercing the very ground they walked on. They carried clipboards and laser measuring devices. They were vultures dressed in silk. They didn't greet me. They didn't acknowledge the woman whose home they were about to dissect. Leo gave a curt nod in my direction. "Mom, These are the appraisers and a developer I was telling you about. Just be cool, okay? Let them do their thing. He hadn't told me about anything. I felt the air leave my lungs. Leo, what is this? You can't just bring people here without asking. My voice was a thin, reedy thing against the confident baritone of their professional chatter. He gave me a look I was beginning to know well, a mixture of pity and profound irritation, the look one gives a child who has spoken out of turn. It's just an assessment, Mom, a formality. We need to know what we're working with. We. The word hung in the air, a declaration of an alliance I was not part of. They swept past me, their expensive cologne a foul desecration of the jasmine-scented air. They didn't walk, they trespassed. Their polished shoes trampled a bed of violets I had nurtured for a decade. I saw a heel crush a delicate purple bloom and felt it in my own chest, a sharp, physical pang. They didn't notice. To them, it was just weeds on a plot of land. I followed them inside, a silent specter in my own home. My home. The home David had built with his own 2 hands, where every floorboard was laid with love and every window framed a shared memory. To them it was a property. They ran their hands over David's hand-planed banister, not feeling the love in the wood, but assessing its market value. Good structure here, one of them muttered, his voice echoing in the hall. Solid foundation, but the layout is dated. We'd have to gut the whole main floor. Open concept is what sells. What's the acreage? Another asked, his eyes scanning past my family photos on the wall as if they were blank spaces. Leo answered, pointing out property lines through the window. Just over 5 acres. Prime for subdivision. We could get 4, maybe 5 luxury homes on this plot if we tear down the main house. Tear down the main house. The words struck me with the force of a physical blow. I stood in the doorway of the living room, gripping the frame. They were talking about erasing my life, about plowing under 60 years of existence for a profit margin. I was a ghost. They spoke through me, around me, about me, but never to me. I could have screamed, and I don't think they would have heard. Later, I found them in the kitchen. Chloe had arrived and was making them coffee, using my wedding gift porcelain cups, the ones I saved for special occasions. She was playing the perfect hostess in a home she was actively trying to destroy. She smiled at the men, a bright plastic thing that didn't reach her eyes. She leaned against the counter David had built, the one with the small, heart-shaped knot in the wood he had deliberately left there for me to find. She was touching it, her manicured nails tapping absently on the very spot he and I had traced with our fingers 1,000 times. I tried to eat lunch at the table with them. Chloe had set out sandwiches. 4 places were set with our good china. A 5th, for me, was placed at the far corner, a small paper plate with a single, sad-looking sandwich on it. My usual water glass was replaced with a cheap plastic cup. "Just easier for you to handle, Anna," Chloe had said with a syrupy smile, as if she were doing me a favor. "You know, with your hands." She glanced at my slightly trembling fingers, a tremor born of age, and now of rage. I sat there, invisible, listening to them talk about demolition costs and zoning permits, while they ate off the plates David and I had picked out together. The invasion was only the beginning. The assault soon became digital, a relentless, daily campaign of humiliation broadcast to the world. It started with Chloe's phone, always pointed, always recording. She announced she was starting a TikTok series. Its title was Decluttering Grandma's Hoard, the first video I saw by accident. My grandniece Sarah had sent me a link, thinking it was something sweet. It was Chloe, holding up a box of David's old woodworking tools. They were worn, the handles smoothed by his grip, stained with the varnish of 100 projects. Chloe held a chisel up to the camera, her face a mask of performative disgust. "Can you guys believe this junk?" she said in a chirpy, sing-song voice. "It's like a museum of tetanus in here. Time for a cleanse." She laughed and tossed the chisel clattering into a cardboard box labeled trash. The video was set to some jaunty, annoying pop song. The comments below were a flood of laughing emojis and, "OMG, my grandma is the same." I felt sick. Each video was a new violation, a fresh stab. She held up my botanical illustrations, the the delicate, painstaking watercolors of native Texas wildflowers I had spent years creating. "Look at all these dusty old pictures," she narrated, flipping through them carelessly, her thumb smudging a rendering of a bluebonnet. "So much clutter. We need a minimalist vibe in here for the staging photos, you know. Hash get right of it and hash our spark joy." She winked at the camera. She was using a phrase about finding joy to mock the things that were the very source of mine. Her son, my grandson, would sometimes wander into the frame. He'd reach for one of my things, a painted stone or a carved bird, and Chloe would snatch his hand away. "No, no, sweetie," she'd coo, loud enough for the phone's microphone to pick it up. "Don't touch that. That's Grandma's dirty stuff. We'll get you new toys when we sell this old house." She was teaching him to see me, to see my life, as disposable, as dirt. Then came Leo's evening broadcasts. He set up a command center in the guest room, complete with a gaming chair and a professional microphone. He wasn't playing video games. He was streaming his conquest of my home on Twitch. "Yo, yo, yo, what is up, payday posse?" His voice would boom through the thin walls of the house, a nightly intrusion into my quiet grief. "Welcome back to the seven-figure shack down. Tonight, we're doing a live tour of the West Wing. Smash that subscribe button if you want to see me turn this dump into a palace." I would sit in my armchair, the one David always said fit me perfectly, and listen to my son sell pieces of my soul for $5 subscriptions. He'd walk through the rooms with his phone, his narration a stream of insults. "Okay, so this was my mom's art studio," he'd say, panning across my canvases. "More like a craft astrophy, am I right? We're thinking home gym here. Sauna. Maybe a Peloton station. Let me know in the chat what you guys think." He wasn't just my son anymore. He was a brand. I was no longer his mother. I was his content. My memories were his material. My home was a set. The sacred spaces of my life. The bedroom where I slept beside my husband for 50 years, the kitchen where I taught Leo how to bake cookies, the garden where I mourned and healed, all of it was reduced to B-roll for his get-rich-quick reality show. The pressure mounted in 1,000 small daily cuts. The meals on paper plates became the norm. My chair was eventually removed from the dining table altogether and replaced with a rickety TV tray set up in the living room, facing a blank wall. "So you can have some peace and quiet, Mom," Leo said, not meeting my eye. They would eat together, a happy family, their laughter echoing from the other room while I ate my cold sandwich in forced isolation. Then the final phase of their campaign began. They came for my independence. I went to the local nursery to buy seeds for the spring planting, a small ritual that always brought me hope. At the checkout, my card was declined. I tried it again. Declined. The young cashier looked at me with pity. I felt a hot flush of shame creep up my neck. I had to leave the seeds, the small packets of future life, sitting on the counter. When I got home, I confronted Leo. He was at his laptop, his face illuminated by the glow of a stock market chart. "My card isn't working," I said, my voice trembling with a mixture of confusion and anger. He didn't look up. "I know. I had it deactivated." "You what? Why?" "That's my money, Leo. My pension." He finally lifted his eyes from the screen. They were cold, devoid of any warmth. "It's our money now, Mom. It's all tied up in the estate, and frankly, you've been spending irresponsibly. Seeds, what's the point of planting things when we're just going to bulldoze them in a few months? It's a waste." A waste. My small joy, my connection to the earth and to David, was a waste. He had taken control of my finances after David died, to make things easier for you, he had said. I had trusted him. I saw now that trust had been a weapon he was waiting to use against me. He wasn't protecting me, he was caging me. My allowance, as he now called it, was cut off completely. The next blow was even more cruel in its modern efficiency. I woke up one morning and tried to go online to read the news. No connection. The Wi-Fi was gone. I knew with a sinking feeling that this was not a technical problem. I found Chloe in the kitchen, scrolling through her phone, her thumb moving at a dizzying speed. "Chloe, the internet isn't working. Do you know the new password?" She looked up, a calculated, sorrowful expression on her face. "Oh, Anna, Leo changed it. For security." He's managing all that now. She went back to her phone, dismissing me. Locked out. Locked out of the world. Locked out of my own bank account. Locked out of my life. The house, my sanctuary, was now a technologically advanced prison. The silence was the worst part. The absence of the low hum of the router was a constant reminder of my isolation. That evening, I knew I had to face him. I walked to the guest room, the command center, and stood in the doorway. He was editing a video, splicing together clips of Chloe mocking my wedding china with graphics of dollar signs exploding on screen. The auction agreement was minimized in a tab at the top of his screen. I could see the words auction agreement in bold. I need the Wi-Fi password, Leo, I said. My voice was quiet, but it was steady. It was the last piece of firm ground I had left to stand on. He swiveled in his chair, and for the first time, he gave me his full, undivided attention. There was no pretense, no false concern. His face was a hard mask of impatience. He pointed his pen at his laptop. "You see that document?" he asked, his voice flat and businesslike. "That's the contract authorizing the auction house to list the property. Sign it. The moment you sign it, I will write the new Wi-Fi password on a piece of paper and hand it to you. I'll even turn your credit card back on." There it was. The ultimatum. Not shouted, but delivered with the chilling calm of a hostage negotiator who held all the power. He wasn't trying to persuade me anymore. He was trying to break me. He wanted to starve me of money, of connection, of dignity, until I was so broken and desperate that I would sign away my entire world for the simple privilege of logging on to the internet. He wanted me to look in the mirror and see what he saw. A worthless, senile burden whose only remaining value was locked in the deed to her house. A problem to be managed and finally liquidated. I stood there in the doorway, the light from his screen casting long, distorted shadows on the floor. The house was silent around us, but in my ears there was a rushing sound, like the tide going out, leaving nothing behind. I looked at the face of my son, a stranger wearing his features, and I felt a cold, terrifying despair wash over me. He had taken everything. And he was waiting, with the patience of a predator, for me to give him the last thing I had left. The silence in the house was a weapon. Not a peaceful quiet, but a thick manufactured stillness, the kind that presses in on you from all sides. Leo had seen to that. My monthly allowance, the one drawn from my own savings, had been suspended. The Wi-Fi password, once a familiar string of characters related to my late husband's birthday, was now an unbreachable fortress. Chloe's laughter, however, still managed to seep through the floorboards from the living room below. It wasn't a sound of joy. It was the sound of victory, sharp and brittle, punctuated by the high-pitched dings of her phone as she uploaded another piece of my life for public consumption. OMG, you guys, you will not believe what dusty relic I found today. #Antique Roadshow, #Hoarders, #Send help. I had become a refugee in my own home, a ghost haunting the upper floors. My world had shrunk to this bedroom and the short, dangerous hallway to the bathroom. Tonight, the sounds from downstairs were louder, more performative. Chloe was vlogging, her voice pitching up into that cloying influencer cadence. So Leo and I are just so excited to finally get this place on the market. It has so much potential, but it needs a complete gut job. We're talking a full reset, you know. Out with the old. Her voice faded as I pushed open the creaking door to the attic stairs. I didn't know what I was looking for. Solitude, perhaps. A pocket of air that didn't feel contaminated by their ambition. The air upstairs was different. It smelled of cedar, aging paper, and time itself. Dust motes danced like fairies in the single beam of light from the bare bulb I'd switched on. This was David's domain, a library of our shared past. Stacked boxes of his architectural drawings, my old canvases wrapped in linen, a child's rocking horse with one ear missing. And this was the one place they hadn't yet thought to monetize. I ran my hand along a stack of old photograph albums, my fingers leaving clean trails in the dust. There was Leo, age 5, holding a fistful of dandelions from the garden, his smile wide and genuine. A wave of nausea, sharp and acidic, rose in my throat. Was that boy truly gone? Had I, in my grief for David, failed to see the man he was becoming? The guilt was a familiar cloak, heavy and suffocating. It was the weapon they used against me most effectively, the one I wielded against myself. "You're a burden, Mom. You can't manage. We're doing this for your own good." Their words echoed in the dusty silence. My foot bumped against something hard, a dark metal lockbox, tucked away beneath an old army blanket. David's box. I hadn't seen it in years. It was heavy, formidable, its surface cold to the touch. I knelt on the creaking floorboards, my old knees protesting, and traced the intricate brass lock. David had always kept the key on his person. It had been buried with him. A fresh pang of loss, as keen as it was the day he died, pierced my heart. For a moment, I was defeated. Another dead end, another memory locked away from me forever. But then I remembered David. He was a builder, a planner. He never created a lock without considering every eventuality. He believed in redundancies, in hidden strengths. I turned the box over. On the bottom, almost invisible in the dim light, were 4 tiny screws. My heart began to beat a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I scrambled through a nearby toolbox, my hands shaking, until I found a small screwdriver. The screws were stiff, rusted with time and humidity, but one by one, they gave way. With a final, protesting groan, the bottom panel came loose. Inside, there was no will, no hidden cash, no sentimental love letters. There was only a single, thick, leather-bound folio. The leather was a deep forest green, and embossed in simple gold lettering on the cover were 4 words: "The Evergreen Legacy Foundation." I lifted it out. It felt important, heavy with more than just the weight of its pages. I opened it, and the smell of ink and high-quality paper filled the small space. The first page was a mission statement, written in David's elegant architectural script. For the preservation of life, in all its forms, a sanctuary for the voiceless, a testament to the enduring power of a single, rooted place. A memory, distant and hazy, surfaced. David, sitting at the kitchen table late one night, years ago, the same folio open before him, the scent of coffee and sawdust in the air. He'd looked up at me, his eyes tired but shining with a quiet passion. "Leo loves money, Anna," he had said, his voice soft. "And there's nothing wrong with that, I suppose. But we love life. We've poured our life into this soil. This land will always protect life." I had smiled then, thinking it was just my husband's poetic way of speaking, a sentimental phrase meant to soothe my worries about our son's growing materialism. I never imagined it was a legal directive, a promise forged in ink and law. The next few days were a blur of furtive activity. With Chloe's vlogging schedule as my guide, I would wait for her to be absorbed in a live stream or an editing session, then slip down to the kitchen to snatch a piece of fruit or a slice of bread, stuffing it in my pockets like a common thief. My primary mission, however, was the folio. I spent hours in the attic poring over the documents. The language was a dense, impenetrable jungle of legalese. Phrases like lifetime executor, irrevocable charitable trust, and asset holding swam before my eyes. I understood the gist of it, the beautiful, brilliant core of David's plan. The homestead, the house, the gardens, the very soil beneath my feet. It wasn't my personal asset. It belonged to the foundation. And I, Anna Miller, was its sole, lifetime executor. Leo's power of attorney, the document he had so smugly waved in my face, the one I had signed in a fog of grief, gave him control over my personal finances, my pension, my savings. But he couldn't touch the foundation. He couldn't sell what was never truly mine to be sold. The realization was like a sun breaking through a storm. But the sun revealed a treacherous landscape ahead. This folio was just a piece of paper. Leo had money, influence, and a team of ruthless lawyers. I had a dusty book and a dwindling sense of hope. I remembered Leo mentioning the foundation once, years ago after David's funeral. He'd glanced at the paperwork I showed him and scoffed. "Some kind of tax shelter nonsense Dad cooked up," he'd said, dismissing it with a wave of his hand. "Don't worry about it, Mom. I'll handle all the boring stuff." His arrogance, his refusal to read the fine print, was now my only shield. But would it be strong enough? I knew I couldn't fight this alone. My first obstacle was a practical one: finding a lawyer. My phone was a useless brick without Wi-Fi, and I had no cash for a taxi. One afternoon, while Leo and Chloe were out, likely scouting locations for their celebratory "we sold Grandma's house" dinner, I found a handful of change in the pocket of an old winter coat. It was enough for the bus. I walked 2 miles to the bus stop, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and defiance. The city library felt like a foreign country, bright and loud and full of people moving with purpose. Using one of their public computers, I searched for probate and trust attorneys. I made a list of 3, my hand trembling as I wrote down their numbers. The first 2 were dead ends. One secretary informed me they had a conflict of interest. Their firm already represented Leo's financial group. The other quoted a retainer fee that was more money than I had seen in a year. The third name on the list was a Mr. Peterson. His office was small, located in a less glamorous part of town. When I called from the library's payphone, he answered himself, his voice gravelly and impatient. He agreed to see me, but warned me his time was valuable. Walking into his office felt like stepping into a different decade. The furniture was worn, the air thick with the smell of old books and stale coffee. Mr. Peterson himself was a man who looked as though he'd been worn down by years of other people's problems. He listened to my story with a look of weary skepticism, his fingers steepled under his chin. "Mrs. Miller," he said when I finished, his tone laced with a tired sort of pity, "I understand you're in a difficult position. It's not uncommon for families to have disagreements over estates. Your son has power of attorney. You signed it. Legally, his position is quite strong. But he doesn't have power over the foundation," I insisted, my voice sounding thin and reedy even to my own ears. "The house belongs to the foundation." He gave me a small, sad smile. "Foundations, trusts, these things can be complicated. They can be challenged. Your son's attorneys will argue that your late husband lacked capacity when he set it up, or that it was a fraudulent conveyance to hide assets. They will argue that you, due to your age, are not competent to act as executor. They will drown us in paperwork and motions until your resources are depleted. The most pragmatic approach," he continued, leaning forward, "is to negotiate. Perhaps we can secure you a larger percentage of the sale, a guaranteed placement in a top-tier assisted living facility." He saw what Leo saw, a confused old woman, an obstacle to be managed. The fire that had been kindled in the attic flickered, threatening to go out. All the fight drained out of me, replaced by a cold, heavy despair. I was a fool to think I could do this. Leo was right. I was a burden. I almost walked out. I almost thanked him for his time and retreated back to my attic prison. But then I thought of David's words. This land will always protect life. It wasn't just about the property. It was about my life, my dignity, my spirit. I straightened my back. I looked Mr. Peterson directly in the eye. "I did not come here to negotiate the terms of my surrender," I said, my voice low and steady. "I came here to hire you to defend a fortress. Before you decide it's indefensible, perhaps you should look at the blueprints." I reached into my tote bag and pulled out the green leather folio. I placed it on the desk between us. The silence in the room was absolute as he opened it. He read the first page, his expression unchanged. Then he turned to the second and the third. I watched as a subtle shift occurred. His weary posture straightened. He leaned closer to the pages, his eyes narrowing, not with skepticism, but with intense concentration. He began to mutter legal terms under his breath, tracing the lines of text with his finger. Sole lifetime executor, non-revocable, asset transfer predates. My God. After what felt like an eternity, he looked up at me. The pity was gone from his eyes. It was replaced by something else, something I hadn't seen in a very long time: respect. "Mrs. Miller," he said, his voice no longer gravelly, but sharp and clear. "Your husband wasn't just a builder. He was a damn genius. This document, this is a work of art. It's ironclad." He paused, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Your son's lawyers are in for a very, very big surprise." The victory was intoxicating but short-lived. A new obstacle arose. one far more insidious than any legal challenge. It was the battle within myself. As Mr. Peterson and I began to strategize, a cold knot of guilt tightened in my stomach. This was my son, my Leo. The boy whose scraped knees I had bandaged, whose bedtime stories I had read, whose future I had prayed for. Now I was plotting against him, preparing to dismantle his ambitions, to publicly humiliate him. Every night, the memories would come. Leo, at his high school graduation, his arm around my shoulder whispering, "I'm gonna make you proud, Mom." Leo on his wedding day, his eyes shining as he looked at Chloe, telling me he had finally found his other half. Had I been so blind? Or had the change been so gradual, so subtle, that I had failed to notice the corrosion of his soul? One evening, I found myself standing outside his old bedroom. I pushed the door open. Chloe had turned it into her storage space for overflow content. But some things remained. A faded poster of a sports car on the wall, a shelf of his childhood books. I picked up a worn copy of Where the Wild Things Are. Inside the cover, in my own handwriting, it said, "To my little king, may you always be brave enough to sail back home. Love, Mom." Tears streamed down my face, hot and silent. The pain was a physical thing, a crushing weight on my chest. I was mourning a son who was still alive. For a moment, my resolve wavered. I could call him. I could tell him to stop, to just stop, and I would sign the papers. I would go to Serene Meadows. I would do anything to have my son back, the boy who loved wild things, not the man who only loved money. I stumbled back to my room, my hand reaching for my useless cell phone. But as I picked it up, I remembered something else. David, in his final months, his body weakened but his mind still sharp. "Don't let him mistake your love for weakness, Anna," he had warned me, his hand gripping mine. "Love is the strongest thing there is. It builds, and it protects. It doesn't just give in." My grief was a battlefield, and I was losing. I needed reinforcements. I needed an ally who wasn't part of this tangled, painful past. And that's when I thought of Sarah, my grandniece, my sister's granddaughter, a 22-year-old coding genius I'd helped put through the engineering program at UT Austin, with a small inheritance David had left specifically for her education. I hadn't spoken to her in months, lost in my own world of loss and later siege. Finding a way to contact her was my next great challenge. I couldn't use the library phone again. I had no more change, and I felt too exposed there. The solution came from an unlikely place, Chloe's vanity. She received dozens of packages a week, clothes, makeup, gadgets she promoted online. She'd leave the flattened cardboard boxes by the recycling bin. One morning, I snuck out at dawn and retrieved one. On the shipping label was her cell phone number. It was a gamble, a desperate one. I waited until I knew Leo and Chloe were at the gym, their predictable morning ritual. I took a deep breath and walked to the gas station at the end of our long country road. I used the grimy payphone, punching in the numbers with a trembling finger. "Hello, Chloe's Closet, you're live with Chloe," she answered, her voice sickeningly cheerful. My own voice was a dry whisper. "Chloe, it's Anna. I need to speak to Sarah. It's an emergency." There was a pause. "Grandma Anna, how did you get this number?" Her tone shifted instantly from bubbly influencer to suspicious gatekeeper. "Sarah's busy with school. You shouldn't bother her." "Please, Chloe, it's important." "Everything is a drama with you," she sighed, the sound exasperated. "Fine, but if you upset her, I'll hear about it." She rattled off Sarah's number, and I scribbled it down on the back of a receipt I'd found in my pocket. The line went dead. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely dial the second number. It rang twice. "This is Sarah." Her voice was clear and sharp, so different from Chloe's. "Sarah, darling, it's your Aunt Anna." "Aunt Anna? I was just thinking about you. How are you? I've been meaning to drive down, but..." The dam broke. The composure I had fought so hard to maintain crumbled. Sobs racked my body as I poured out the whole sordid story. The birthday party, the power of attorney, the vlogging, the cut-off funds, the threat of Serene Meadows, the discovery in the attic. I told her everything, the words tumbling out in a torrent of fear and desperation. Sarah listened without interrupting. When I finally finished, gasping for breath, the line was silent for a long moment. I was afraid she, too, would think I was a confused old woman. Then she spoke, and her voice was cold steel. "They are trying to cancel you, Aunt Anna," she said, the fury in her tone a balm to my frayed nerves. "They are trying to delete a legend. You stay put. Don't talk to them. Don't sign anything. I'm on my way." That night, a small, unassuming sedan pulled into the long driveway, its headlights off. Sarah slipped out of the car and met me at the back door, which I had managed to unbolt. She hugged me tight, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel alone. She was a whirlwind of quiet, efficient energy. In my room, she pulled a laptop and a bag of strange-looking devices from her backpack. "First things first," she said, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "Let's see what they've been up to." She scanned the house's network, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Wow, they're not even subtle. Keylogger software on the main desktop. They've been tracking every website you visit, every password you type." She pointed to a tiny device plugged into the back of my old alarm clock. "And a listening device. Low-tech, but effective. Leo's getting sloppy." She deactivated it all with a few clicks. Then she handed me a small, sleek burner phone. "This is encrypted," she explained. "No calls, only secure messaging and video conferencing. Your Mr. Peterson can use the same app. From now on, they're deaf and blind." She taught me how to use it, her patience endless, her instructions clear. The fear I'd had of technology began to recede, replaced by a sense of empowerment. This was a new kind of weapon, and I had a master strategist on my side. We sat on my bed, the green folio open between us. Sarah read David's mission statement aloud. "To provide sanctuary and healing for the voiceless, both human and animal." She looked up at me, her eyes fierce. "He wrote this for you, Aunt Anna. For right now. You've become the voiceless one in your own home." And in that moment, the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. The plan, which had been a hazy, terrifying idea, sharpened into crystal clarity. It was audacious, shocking, and so profoundly right, it made my heart sing. "They think this is about money, Sarah," I said, a smile spreading across my face, the first genuine smile in a year. "They think the prize is the millions they'll get from the sale." "What is it about then?" she asked, leaning in. "It's about life," I answered, my voice filled with a strength I didn't know I possessed. "David's folio gives me a directive, to provide sanctuary, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to just donate the proceeds from the sale. There will be no sale." Sarah's eyes widened. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I'm going to donate the homestead itself. I'm going to turn this house, this land, Leo's coveted multi-million-dollar prize, into exactly what David intended it to be. A place of peace, built on the ashes of their greed." My mind raced, the vision unfolding before me. The gardens. They will be a horticultural therapy center for veterans suffering from PTSD. A place for them to put their hands in the earth and find healing. And the stables, the old barn. We'll turn it into a rescue farm for abused and abandoned animals. I looked at my grandniece, her face a mixture of shock and dawning admiration. "They want to erase David's legacy," I said, my voice ringing with conviction. "Instead, I'm going to make it evergreen. I'm going to make it immortal." The silence in the house the next morning was a living thing, thick and heavy with unspoken expectations. It clung to the floral wallpaper in the hall and pooled in the dust motes dancing in the sunbeams. Leo and Chloe were waiting for me in the kitchen, a battlefield disguised with a coffee pot and a plate of store-bought pastries. They sat at the small table David had built with his own hands, the same table where he'd sketched out the first plans for this house, his pencil strokes filled with love and optimism. Now, it was a makeshift gallows. Leo didn't get up when I entered. He just gestured with his chin towards a sheaf of papers laid out like a death sentence in the middle of the table. "Morning, Mom. Slept okay?" His voice was slick with false concern, the kind a butcher might use on a prize-winning lamb. Chloe smiled, a tight, rehearsed stretching of her lips. "We brought croissants, Anna. The almond ones you like." It wasn't a kindness. It was a final meal. They were treating me like a condemned prisoner, offering small comforts before the inevitable end. They believed my spirit was already broken, that the campaign of torment had succeeded. They saw the tired lines around my eyes and mistook them for defeat, not for the sleepless nights spent memorizing David's legal fortifications. I didn't look at the pastries. My eyes were fixed on the document. The bold header read, "Exclusive Auction Agreement." Each letter was a black nail they intended to drive into the coffin of my life with David. I let my gaze linger on it, letting them see what they wanted to see. An old woman overwhelmed by legal jargon, by the sheer weight of their will. I don't understand all these words," I murmured, my voice a papery, fragile thing. I had practiced that voice in the mirror last night, sanding away the edges of my resolve until only the quaver of a frightened elder remained. Leo sighed, a theatrical display of exhausted patience. He pushed the papers closer to me, his finger jabbing at the signature line. "You don't need to understand it, Mom. You just need to sign it. It's for the best. We've been over this. The house is too much for you. The money will set you up for life at Serene Meadows. No more worries. No more worries. No more memories. No more love. No more David." That's what he meant. Chloe chimed in, her voice dripping with venomous syrup. "We've already put a deposit down on the loveliest corner room for you, Anna. It has a big window with a view of their rose garden. You'll be so comfortable." The cruelty of it was breathtaking. They would take my garden, the one I had cultivated from David's seeds, the one that held the scent of our shared history, and replace it with a sanitized, generic plot of land tended by strangers. They weren't just taking my home. They were trying to erase me, to overwrite my life with a bland, manageable final chapter of their own design. I reached for the pen he held out. I made sure my fingers fumbled, that my hand shook with a convincing tremor. It was the hand of a botanical artist, a hand that had once rendered the most delicate veins on a leaf with unwavering precision. Now, it was the hand of a master illusionist. The cheap plastic of the ballpoint pen felt slick and foreign against my skin. It was his weapon, and he was forcing me to use it against myself. I leaned over the paper, feigning a deep, shuddering breath. I could feel their eyes on me, two pairs of predatory sights trained on their prey. They were leaning forward, hungry for the scrawl of my name, the final act of surrender. I squinted, pretending to struggle with the words. "Are you sure? Are you sure this is the only way?" "It's the best way, Mom." "The only way," Leo said, his voice firm. Final. He was done negotiating. The time for pretense was over. This was a command. I let a single tear trace a path down my cheek. I hadn't planned it, but it was a perfect, devastating touch. It was a real tear, but not for the reasons they imagined. It was a tear of grief for the son I had lost, the boy who had once built me a clumsy birdhouse in this very kitchen and had now grown into a monster who would sell the beams and rafters that had sheltered him. I lowered the pen to the page. The ink bled onto the paper, a black stain of capitulation. My signature was a spiderweb of spidery, uncertain lines, nothing like my usual firm script. It was the signature of a ghost. "Whatever you think is best, dear," I whispered, pushing the papers back toward him. The performance was complete. Leo snatched the agreement up, his eyes scanning the signature as if to confirm the kill. A slow, triumphant smile spread across his face, a truly ugly thing to witness. It was the smile of a vulture who had finally waited out the lion. He reached over and patted my shoulder, a gesture not of comfort, but of ownership. It was a pat that said, "You're mine. This is all mine now. There now. That wasn't so hard, was it?" he said, his voice oozing with condescension. "You did the right thing." He and Chloe exchanged a glance over my head, a silent, smug communication of their victory. They saw a frail old woman in a floral housecoat, a relic finally giving way to the future they had planned. They saw weakness, confusion, and grief. They saw a signature on a dotted line. They didn't see the executor of my husband's legacy. They didn't see the woman who had spent the night before on a video call with a retired Army general and a team of pro bono lawyers. They didn't see the architect of their downfall. They saw the trap closing, but they had no idea they were the ones caught inside it. As they left the kitchen, their laughter echoing down the hall, I sat in the profound silence, the taste of ashes in my mouth and ice in my veins. The war had just begun. The day crawled by in a haze of feigned frailty. I moved through the rooms of my home like a visitor, touching the spines of David's books, running my fingers along the cool wood of the windowsill in our bedroom. Every action was a performance. When Chloe found me looking at an old photo album, she clucked her tongue with pity. "Oh, Anna, don't torture yourself with the past. It's time to look forward." I just nodded, a sad little smile on my face, letting her believe she was witnessing a mournful farewell. In truth, I wasn't looking at the past. I was drawing strength from it. Every photograph of David, every smiling image of us in the garden, was a fresh log on the fire of my resolve. That evening, the smell of cheap, greasy chicken filled the house, an alien scent that had no place here. It was the smell of their victory feast. From my bedroom, I could hear their loud, boisterous laughter from the living room. It was a jarring sound in a house accustomed to quiet contemplation and the soft melodies of classical music. I heard the sharp click-flash of a phone camera, followed by Chloe's high-pitched squeal. "Oh, that's a good one, Leo. #power couple. #winning." A few minutes later, my phone buzzed with a notification. Sarah had set it up for me. It was an alert for when Leo or Chloe posted on social media. I unlocked the screen. There they were, grinning into the camera, holding up greasy drumsticks like trophies. Behind them, my fireplace, the one David and I had built stone by stone, was out of focus, just a prop in their tacky tableau. The caption read, "Secured the bag. Big moves coming soon. Can't wait to leave this dusty old shack in the rear view. #real estate, #millionaire, mindset, #legacy, #hustle." The word legacy felt like a physical blow. They were stealing the very concept, twisting it into something ugly and transactional. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and let the cold, clean anger wash over me. Their loud, shallow celebration was the perfect cover for my quiet, profound conspiracy. I locked my bedroom door, the soft click of the bolt, a declaration of intent. I sat at my small writing desk and opened my laptop. The screen flickered to life, and the garish, celebratory sounds from the living room faded into a dull, meaningless thrum. On my screen, there were no selfies or hashtags. There were faces. 4 windows were open in a secure video conference. In the top left was Sarah, my brilliant grandniece, her expression calm and focused. She was my digital guardian angel, the silent operator pulling the strings of technology on my behalf. "Everything is secure, Aunt Anna," she said softly. "No one can listen in." In the top right was a man whose face seemed carved from granite and integrity. General Marcus Miller, retired of the Lone Star Veterans Alliance. His uniform was gone, replaced by a simple collared shirt, but the authority in his eyes was unmistakable. He gave a curt, respectful nod. "Mrs. Henderson, we're ready to proceed." Below him was the warm, intelligent face of Dr. Anya Sharma, the founder of the Paws Hooves Rescue. Her background was a blur of what looked like hay bales and the occasional curious muzzle of a horse nosing into the frame. Her passion was a palpable force, even through the screen. "Anna, what you're doing it's a miracle for us," she said, her voice thick with emotion. The final window held 2 people, a man and a woman in sharp, dark suits. They were the lawyers the Alliance and the Rescue had provided, their expressions neutral but intensely focused. They were the instruments of the law, the final seal on David's promise. While Leo and Chloe were celebrating the acquisition of a bag of money, I was presiding over a council that would secure a true legacy. While they were gorging on fried chicken, we were building a sanctuary. "The documents are ready for your final review, Mrs. Henderson," said the female lawyer, her nameplate reading Miss Albright. She shared her screen, and a formidable legal document filled my laptop display. The Evergreen Legacy Foundation, Irrevocable Deed of Gift. Sarah guided me patiently. "Okay, Aunt Anna, just scroll with the mouse like we practiced. Miss Albright will walk you through the key clauses." I listened as the lawyer's calm, precise voice cut through the legalese, translating the dense paragraphs into simple, powerful truths. Clause 3A, she read, designates the property in its entirety as a protected land trust in perpetuity. In perpetuity means forever, Mrs. Henderson. It can never be broken up, developed, or sold for commercial gain. Forever. The word echoed in the quiet of my room. It was the word David had used in his vows to me. Clause 4C, she continued, formally transfers the ownership of said property from you as an individual to the Evergreen Legacy Foundation, effective upon electronic filing with the Travis County Clerk's Office tomorrow morning at 9:00 a.m. sharp. And Section 7, the male lawyer added, confirms your position as the sole, lifetime executor of the Foundation's charter. The board, represented here by General Miller and Dr. Sharma, can advise, but final authority on the execution of the Foundation's mission rests with you, and you alone. Your son's power of attorney, which we have reviewed, gives him control over your personal finances. But as of 9:01 a.m. tomorrow, this house and this land will no longer be your personal property. They will belong to the Foundation. His document will be utterly useless in this matter. Ironclad. That was the word they had used. It felt like the truest, most beautiful word in the English language. Sarah prompted me. There's a box at the bottom, Aunt Anna. You just need to type your full name and click Adopt Signature. My hand, the same hand that had trembled so convincingly that morning, was now as steady as the ancient oaks outside my window. I moved the mouse, my heart a slow, powerful drum against my ribs. I typed my name, Anna Mae Henderson. I clicked the button. A digital version of my true, firm signature appeared on the final line. It was done. General Miller's stoic expression softened into a look of profound respect. David was a good man, Anna. He served his country, and now his legacy will continue to serve. You are honoring him in the best way possible. Dr. Sharma was openly weeping, a hand pressed to her mouth. The lives you're going to save, the animals, the people. You have no idea what this means. I looked at their faces, these strangers who had become my allies, my co-conspirators. They understood the soul of this place. They saw what Leo and Chloe, blinded by greed, could never see. This wasn't a dusty old shack. It was a vessel of hope. We spent another hour finalizing the plan for the coming storm. The lawyers confirmed the deed would be filed electronically the moment the county clerk's office opened. The Foundation's bank accounts, seeded by David years ago and now controlled by me, were active. The pieces were in place. When we finally signed off, the silence in my room returned, but it was a different kind of silence now. It was filled with power, with purpose, with the quiet hum of an immense machine just waiting for the signal to roar to life. Outside my door, I could hear the television blaring. The victory party was winding down. Soon they would go to sleep, dreaming of dollar signs, completely unaware that their inheritance had already turned to ash. I sat in the dark, the glow of the laptop screen illuminating my face, and for the first time in months, I smiled a real, genuine smile. In the days that followed, I became a ghost in my own home, a master of inhabiting the background. Leo was a whirlwind of frantic, self-important energy. His phone was permanently attached to his ear as he barked orders at auctioneers, caterers, and landscapers he'd hired to improve curb appeal by tearing out my perennial beds. He was a man possessed by the demon of imminent wealth, and he barely registered my presence beyond a cursory, "Stay out of the way, Mom, we're busy." Chloe was just as consumed, spending her days online shopping, filling virtual carts with designer handbags and resort vacations. She would occasionally show me her phone, pointing to a gaudy monstrosity of a purse. "Look, Anna, when we sell the house, I'm getting this one in every color. Won't that be nice?" I would just nod, my eyes placid, my mind a churning sea of strategy. Their blindness was my greatest asset. It was Sarah who suggested the final, critical piece of our counteroffensive. "We can't just let the legal filing do the talking, Aunt Anna," she had said during one of our brief, encrypted calls. "They'll try to spin it, call you senile, contest it in court for years. We have to control the narrative. We have to tell the story ourselves, in your words." And so, 2 days before the scheduled auction, Sarah arrived under the pretense of helping me pack some personal keepsakes. Leo barely gave her a second glance, just a dismissive grunt as she helped me carry a small box of photo albums up to my room. "Make sure she doesn't pack anything valuable," he called after us. "It's all part of the estate." Upstairs, with the door securely closed, Sarah didn't unpack the box. Instead, she took out a small, high-definition camera and a discreet lapel microphone. There were no bright lights, no crew, no artifice. The stage was to be my life, exactly as it was. She guided me to my favorite armchair, the one with the worn fabric on the arms where David used to rest his hands. It faced the large window that overlooked the gardens, the late afternoon sun streaming in, casting a warm, golden light across the room. It was the light of truth. Sarah didn't position me. She just said, "Sit where you feel most comfortable, Aunt Anna." I settled into the chair, its familiar contours a comfort and a source of strength. I didn't need a script. The words had been living inside me for months, waiting for their moment. I placed the worn leather folio David had made on my lap. It wasn't a prop, it was my shield. It held his notes, his sketches, his soul. Sarah set up the camera on a small tripod. "Just look at me," she said, her voice gentle and encouraging. "Forget the camera is even here. Just tell me about the house." She pressed the record button. I took a deep, steadying breath, the air filled with the scent of lemon balm and lavender drifting in from the garden. There were no tears in my eyes, no tremor in my voice. The frail, confused woman from the kitchen was gone. In her place sat the executor. "My name is Anna Henderson," I began, my voice clear and calm. "And I am sitting in the home my late husband David and I built over 40 years ago. To some, this may look like a piece of property, a parcel of land, an asset to be liquidated." I paused, letting the words hang in the sunlit air. "But it is not. This is a living place. Every stone in that fireplace, we placed with our own hands. Every tree in that orchard, we planted as a sapling. David used to say that this land had a spirit, a duty to protect and nurture life. He wasn't speaking poetically. He meant it, and he enshrined it in law." I opened the folio on my lap, my fingers tracing the familiar lines of his handwriting. He was a veteran. He saw enough destruction in his youth to last a lifetime. His greatest wish was to build a sanctuary, a place of peace. In his journal, he wrote. I looked down, reading the words that had become my mantra. "This land will not be a monument to my memory. It will be a testament to life's resilience. It will always protect life." I looked back at the camera, my gaze direct and unwavering. To honor that promise many years ago, David and I placed this homestead and all its land into a charitable trust, the Evergreen Legacy Foundation. This property does not belong to me. It belongs to the foundation. And as its sole executor, I can tell you with absolute certainty, it will never be for sale. A small, genuine smile touched my lips. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated joy. Instead, it is about to begin its true purpose. In partnership with the Lone Star Veterans Alliance and the Paws Hooves Rescue, this land is being reborn. We are turning the pastures into a sanctuary for abused and neglected farm animals. The old barn will become a therapy center where veterans suffering from post-traumatic stress can come to heal by working with these gentle creatures. This house will provide temporary housing for those in the program. It will not be a place of ending, but a place of new beginnings. I leaned forward slightly, speaking now not just to Sarah, but to the thousands of people who would soon be watching. This is the true legacy of this land, not a sale price, not a commission, but a mission of healing, of hope, and of life. We invite you to be a part of it. When I finished, the room was silent, save for the chirping of a wren outside the window. Sarah slowly reached out and turned off the camera. Her eyes were shining with tears. "That was perfect, Aunt Anna," she whispered. "Absolutely perfect." For the rest of the afternoon, we worked. The quiet, methodical work of a silent coup. Sarah showed me the campaign she had built. It was a masterpiece of digital strategy. A simple, elegant website for the Evergreen Legacy Foundation was ready to go live. A press release containing quotes from myself, General Miller, and Dr. Sharma was drafted and ready. A master list was on her screen, a spreadsheet with hundreds of contacts, every local news outlet in Texas, every influential blogger who wrote about veterans affairs or animal rights, every community Facebook group within a 100-mile radius. She created a scheduled social media blitz. The video would be the centerpiece. It was set to be posted across a dozen platforms simultaneously. The press release was set to be emailed to every journalist on the list at the exact same time. The website was set to go live at the same second. The launch time for this entire digital tidal wave was set for Saturday at 11:00 a.m., the exact time the auction for my home was scheduled to begin. As Sarah packed up her camera, leaving the box of keepsakes behind, she gave me a fierce hug. "They won't know what hit them," she said. That night, as I lay in bed, I could hear Leo on the phone in the hallway, his voice loud and giddy. "Yeah, the bids are going to be insane. We're talking 7 figures easy. My mother? Oh, she's finally come to her senses. Yeah, it's a done deal." I closed my eyes, a profound calm settling over me. He was right. It was a done deal. Just not his. The conspiracy was silent. The trap was set. All that was left was to watch them walk into it. The morning air, usually sweet with the scent of dew-kissed rosemary and damp earth, was tainted with the artificial smell of diesel from a generator and cheap, fried food from a catering truck. From my upstairs bedroom window, the one David had framed specifically to catch the sunrise over the eastern hills, I watched the circus assemble on my lawn. White, sterile tents bloomed like fungal growths on the green grass. Men in suits, their faces tight with predatory focus, milled about, sipping coffee from paper cups and gesturing at the ancient oaks as if they were calculating their value as lumber. They were vultures, yes, but of a specific modern breed. There was the one in the sharkskin suit, his hair slicked back, who held his phone like a weapon and spoke in clipped, arrogant tones about market potential. There was the older, gruff one, a local land baron who had been trying to get his hands on this property for decades, his eyes scanning not the house but the acreage, mentally carving it into soulless, identical plots. And then there were the younger ones, hungry and nervous, their ambition a cheap cologne I could smell even from here. My son, Leo, was the ringmaster. He stood near a makeshift stage, a ridiculous portable microphone in his hand, his chest puffed out so far I worried a button might pop off his too-tight polo shirt. He was playing the part of the successful heir, the savvy businessman liquidating a burdensome asset. He didn't see the garden David and I had planted from seed. He saw a landscaping liability. He didn't see the porch swing where we'd watched 1,000 sunsets. He saw outdated curb appeal. He saw numbers, and today, those numbers were going to make him a king. And then there was Chloe, my daughter-in-law, gliding through the crowd with a phone mounted on a gimbal. Her smile was a blinding, perfectly white construction. She was live streaming on Facebook, narrating her husband's triumph to a digital audience of strangers. I could imagine her voice, a high saccharine purr I'd come to despise. "Hey fam, Chloe here, coming to you live from the stunning Evergreen Homestead." I pictured her panning the camera across the crowd, careful to frame the shot to make it look bustling and important. It is an absolutely gorgeous day here in the Texas Hill Country, and the energy is just electric. My incredible husband Leo is about to make history. We're talking a multi-million-dollar deal, people. This is what vision looks like. It's about moving forward, embracing the future. So many of you have been following our journey, and we just want to thank you for all the love and support. It hasn't been easy, but we knew we were doing the right thing. Now, let's get this show on the road. I turned from the window. Sarah had set up a small, discreet monitor on my writing desk, linked to the same feed as the giant LED screen behind Leo's stage. On my desk, everything was calm. A single cup of chamomile tea steamed beside my hand. A photo of David smiling, his eyes full of the same light I saw in the garden, sat beside the monitor. The contrast was a chasm. Outside, the noise of greed. Inside, the quiet hum of a promise about to be kept. Sarah's chat window was open on my laptop. A single message from her. All systems green. Ready when you are, Grandma. Break a leg. I smiled. The term felt appropriate. Something was certainly about to break. On the monitor, I watched Leo step onto the stage. The small crowd of developers applauded politely. He beamed, soaking it in. He tapped the microphone, and a sharp feedback squeal cut through the air, making a few people wince. He was an amateur playing at being a professional. Thank you, he began, his voice booming artificially across the lawn, an alien sound in this place of birdsong and wind chimes. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to a new beginning. He paused for dramatic effect, his gaze sweeping over the property, my home. For too long, this beautiful piece of land has been dormant, a relic of the past. But progress, as we all know, is inevitable. It is the engine of prosperity. He was reading from a script he'd clearly rehearsed, the words sounding hollow and foreign. He spoke of unlocking potential, of maximizing value, of creating a premier residential enclave for discerning buyers. He never said the word home. He never mentioned my name or his father's. We were the ghosts he was trying to exorcise with his talk of money. He gestured to the auctioneer, a man with a booming voice and a practiced, insincere smile. I won't bore you with sentiment. We're here to do business. The property, all 50 acres, and the existing structures are being sold as is. The bidding starts at $3 million. A collective intake of breath from the audience. Chloe's camera zoomed in on Leo's triumphant face. He looked directly into her lens, a conqueror. The auctioneer raised his polished wooden gavel. $3 million! Do I have $3 million? He bellowed. His arm was poised at the apex of its swing, the moment of no return. The moment the past would be shattered for good. That was the cue. On my command, Sarah pressed the button. The giant LED screen behind the auctioneer flickered. The slideshow of glossy, depersonalized photos of my home, the ones Chloe had staged to look empty and sad, vanished. The screen went black for a single pregnant second. A confused murmur rippled through the developers. Leo, mid-smirk, faltered. His eyes darted to the side of the stage, looking for a technician to blame. The auctioneer's gavel remained frozen in the air. And then my face appeared. Not the face of a grieving widow or a confused old woman. It was my face, yes, but it was composed, resolute. I was seated in my favorite armchair, the warm light of the living room lamp illuminating the books behind me. The camera was steady, the quality high definition. I looked directly into the lens, as if I were looking into the eyes of every single person on my lawn. The silence that fell was absolute. It was deeper and more profound than the quiet of the early morning. It was a vacuum, sucking all the air and arrogance out of the space. My voice, calm and clear, echoed from the speakers, carrying across the lawn that David's hands had shaped. Good morning, I said. My tone wasn't angry or pleading. It was simply a statement of fact. Leo's face, visible on my monitor, cycled through confusion, then irritation, then a dawning horror. Chloe's hand must have been shaking, because the live stream image jolted. My name is Anna Evergreen, I continued, my voice unwavering. And I am the steward of this land. I am speaking to you today from inside the home my husband, David, built with his own 2 hands, the home you are standing in front of, with the intention of bidding on its destruction. I let that sink in for a moment. I saw the man in the sharkskin suit shift his weight uncomfortably. The older land baron had stopped staring at the acreage and was now staring at the screen, his brow furrowed. I understand you are here to conduct a transaction, I said, my gaze steady, but you have been brought here under false pretenses, so I want to be perfectly, unequivocally clear. I leaned forward slightly, my voice dropping a little, gaining intensity. The Evergreen Homestead is not, and will never be, for sale. A gasp went through the crowd. Leo lunged for the microphone. What is this? Shut this off! Technical difficulties, folks, he yelled, his voice cracking with panic. But no one was listening to him. They were watching me. The auctioneer slowly, quietly, lowered his gavel, placing it on the lectern. My husband, David, did not see this land as an asset to be liquidated, my video self explained. He saw it as a sanctuary, a place of healing. When he passed, he left me not just a home, but a mission. He enshrined it in a legal trust, a foundation created for a single purpose, to protect and nurture life. It's called the Evergreen Legacy Foundation. As I spoke the name of the foundation, a new sound began to compete with my voice. It started as a single ding from someone's phone, then another, and another. Soon, it was a cascade, a digital symphony of notifications. Every person in that audience, including Chloe, whose phone was still broadcasting her own humiliation, was being hit by the digital storm Sarah had just unleashed. I watched their faces on my monitor. They pulled out their phones. Their expressions shifted from confusion to wide-eyed comprehension. Sarah had been brilliant. It wasn't just a tweet. It was a coordinated, overwhelming press. A push alert from the Austin Chronicle. Local widow turns ancestral homestead into veteran and animal sanctuary, thwarting son's auction. A trending hashtag on Twitter, @Evergreen Sanctuary, already filled with messages of support. A post on the Texas Veterans Commission's official Facebook page announcing a new partnership with the Evergreen Sanctuary for Healing, complete with architectural renderings of therapeutic riding stables and quiet gardens for soldiers with PTSD. A shared post from Austin's largest animal rescue, celebrating the donation of 50 acres for a new rehabilitation center for abused and neglected farm animals, with a link to my foundation's brand new website. The developers looked up from their phones, their faces pale. They looked at the beautiful, peaceful land around them. They looked at the video of me, speaking with quiet dignity about healing and legacy. Then they looked at Leo, who was now frantically, uselessly, jiggling a power cord at the base of the stage. They were not just investors at a land auction anymore. They were the villains in a heartwarming, viral news story. The man in the sharkskin suit was the first to go. He didn't run. He simply straightened his tie, gave Leo a look of pure, unadulterated contempt, and turned, walking briskly and purposefully toward his polished black sedan. He wasn't going to be the face of developer tries to evict widow to build condos. The older land baron grunted, shook his head as if to clear it, and followed suit, lumbering toward his oversized pickup truck. Two of the younger, hungry ones exchanged a terrified glance and practically scurried away. One by one, in a silent, humiliating exodus, they abandoned the circus. They got in their expensive cars and drove away down the long gravel path, leaving behind the white tents, the untouched catered food, and my son, standing alone on his pathetic stage. Leo watched them go, his mouth hanging open. The arrogance had evaporated, replaced by a raw, slack-jawed disbelief. The engine of prosperity had stalled. The great ringmaster was left standing in an empty tent. He turned his head slowly and stared at the screen, at my face, which was just finishing its pre-recorded statement. "And so this land will continue its true purpose," my image said. "Not as a monument to the past, but as a living, breathing promise for the future. A place of peace, a place of healing, a sanctuary." The video faded to black, replaced by the simple, elegant logo of the Evergreen Legacy Foundation. For a moment, there was only the sound of the wind in the trees. Then Leo screamed. It wasn't a word. It was a sound from the deepest, most primitive part of his soul. A raw, guttural howl of pure, impotent fury. It was the sound of a future built on greed dissolving into dust. He ran, stumbling, at the giant screen, clawing at its smooth surface, as if he could physically tear my image out of the air. He ripped at the cables, but it was too late. The message had been delivered. The truth was out. And all of it, every single, mortifying second, was being captured by Chloe. She stood frozen, the gimbal still humming, her influencer's smile gone, replaced by a mask of chalky shock. Her phone was still live. Through the monitor, I could see the little icon on her screen, a small red box with a number inside, and the number was climbing, fast. 50,000, 75,000, 90,000. The comments were flying by too fast to read, a torrent of scorn and mockery. Leo, defeated, finally gave up his assault on the screen. He staggered back, his face crimson, his eyes wild. He looked at the empty lawn, the departing cars, the silent house. And then he collapsed. His legs simply gave out from under him, and he fell to his knees on the very grass he had tried to sell. He put his head in his hands and sobbed. his shoulders shaking with the force of his breakdown. The live stream view count ticked over 100,000. Chloe finally looked down at her phone. She saw the number. She saw the flood of comments. She saw what she had done. She hadn't just documented a triumph. She had produced, directed, and broadcast her husband's complete and utter annihilation to the world. The internet had its villain, and she had delivered him gift-wrapped. Her face crumpled, and with a trembling finger, she finally ended the stream. But it didn't matter. The meltdown had already gone viral. The legacy was sealed. But it wasn't his. It was David's. And it was mine. I never saw the full text of the lawyer's email, nor did I hear the recording of the phone call that followed. Sarah told me about it later, piecing the story together from a mutual acquaintance in the legal world. The call, she said, was less than 10 minutes, a short, brutal, and surgically precise amputation of Leo's last remaining hope. The lawyer, a man who charged by the second and never wasted a word, laid it out in terms even Leo's greed-clouded mind couldn't misinterpret. The Evergreen Legacy Foundation wasn't just a legal shield. It was a fortress. David had built it with the same meticulous care he had used to build our home, plank by plank, stone by stone. Every contingency was foreseen, every loophole sealed. The land, the house, every blade of grass, and every rosebush were not my personal assets. They belonged to the foundation, and I was merely its lifelong steward, its sworn protector. Leo's power of attorney, the weapon he had wielded with such cruel confidence, was rendered as useless as a key to a house that no longer existed. It gave him power over my personal finances, the modest pension and savings I had. But against the foundation, it was just a piece of paper. Then came the part that truly sealed his fate. "Let me be clear, Leo," the lawyer had said, his voice devoid of any sympathy. "Your only recourse is to sue. You would be suing your 70-year-old widowed mother. You would be attempting in a public court to dismantle a legally irrevocable charitable trust established by your late father. And what is the purpose of this trust? To create a sanctuary for abused animals and a therapeutic center for military veterans. The media narrative writes itself. You would be the villain in a story that every local news station, every blogger, and every social media influencer would fight to tell. It wouldn't just be a losing case. It would be professional and social suicide. No jury would side with you. No client would trust you again. Your name would become synonymous with monstrous greed. I cannot, in good conscience, represent you in such a self-destructive endeavor. My professional advice is to walk away. My invoice will be in the mail." That was it. The click of the phone ending the call was the sound of his world collapsing. The social ruin had already begun, of course. The livestream of his meltdown at the auction had become a viral sensation, a masterclass in public humiliation. Chloe, in her panic, had let it run for a full 7 minutes before realizing her mistake. 7 minutes of raw, unfiltered rage and despair broadcast to over 100,000 people. He was no longer Leo the financial guru, the savvy investor. He was the auction crybaby, the Homestead humiliator. Memes were born. His online courses were flooded with one-star reviews. His clients, spooked by the display of such profound instability and monstrous character, began to pull their portfolios. The man who had tried to turn my life into monetized content had become the most toxic content of all. The empire he built on a foundation of digital smoke and mirrors vanished into thin air, leaving only the ashes of a tarnished reputation and a mountain of debt from the lavish, failed auction. I never spoke to him again. In the first few weeks, my phone would light up with his name, the calls coming at odd hours of the night, fueled, I imagine, by desperation and disbelief. I never answered. Eventually, they stopped. The silence that followed was not empty. It was filled with a profound and healing peace. The house, once a stage for his cruelty, began to breathe again. My days are no longer marked by the dread of an approaching car or the sharp, demanding ring of the phone. Instead, they have a new rhythm, a new soundtrack. It's the gentle, rhythmic crunch of hay being chewed by rescued horses in the newly built stables. Their soft nickers a constant, gentle conversation in the background of my life. It's the sound of laughter, real and unforced, as volunteers share coffee on the porch before starting their morning tasks. It's the quiet, almost reverent footsteps of a young woman, a soldier back from a tour that left scars no one can see as she walks through the rose garden David planted. She doesn't speak much, but sometimes I see her rest a hand on the velvet petals of a peace rose, and her shoulders, usually so tense, finally relax. The first truck of rescued beagles arrived last week. A local lab, shut down for violations, had surrendered them. They came out of their crates blinking in the bright Texas sun, their paws touching grass for the first time. The tentative confusion in their eyes slowly gave way to a wild, uncoordinated joy as they discovered the simple miracle of being able to run. Now, the air is often punctuated by their happy, yelping barks as they chase butterflies across the meadow. My niece, Sarah, has become a permanent fixture here. She traded her city apartment for the small guest cottage, her fingers, once flying across a keyboard in a sterile office, now expertly fixing a leaky irrigation pipe or calming a nervous pony. Her presence is a quiet hum of competence and love. The house is no longer just my home. It's a hub of gentle, purposeful activity. It is alive in a way it has never been before, teeming with souls, both human and animal, that are, like me, in the process of healing. I am Anna. I sit on my porch swing, the one David built from the sturdy oak that once stood by the creek. The wood is smooth and worn under my hands, a silent testament to decades of shared sunsets and quiet conversations. The air smells of honeysuckle and freshly cut grass. I watch the sun dip below the rolling hills, painting the sky in strokes of fiery orange and soft lavender, a masterpiece that changes every evening. This land, this homestead, is more alive than it has ever been. It breathes. It breathes with the slow, deep sighs of the horses in the pasture, with the excited panting of the dogs playing in the yard, with the quiet gratitude of the people who come here seeking solace. It breathes with purpose. Leo saw this place, and only saw its monetary value. And he looked at the old-growth trees and calculated board feet. He looked at the open fields and saw plots for development. He looked at my memories and saw them as clutter to be cleared away for a sale. He tried to strip this land of its history, to silence its story, all for a number on a bank statement. He failed to understand that its true value could never be appraised, never be auctioned. The real inheritance wasn't the deed or the acreage. It was the spirit David had infused into every corner of this place, a spirit of sanctuary, of growth, of unwavering love. I didn't need the money. I had something far more precious. I chose to inherit its soul. And in the profound, humming quiet of the evening, as the first stars begin to prick the velvet sky, I can feel this land settle around me like a warm embrace, finally at peace. And I am at peace with it.